Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of the Broadcast Club. I am your host, Ralana Tricolor.
I am Nakanashi.
And I am Ange Time.
For this episode, we'll be talking about untranslated visual novels, focusing primarily on Japanese, and we have brought, for the first time, a repeat guest, Mr. Cornetto Man.
Hi there, it's me, Cornetto, or Corn, whichever is easier.
You want to briefly reintroduce yourself for anyone who may have forgotten in the long interim since the last time you were here?
Well, who could possibly forget Corn?
It's been a while, yeah. No,
that Irish bastard.
My name is Cornetto Man. I'm from Ireland. I've been reading visual novels for, I think, like 5 or 6 years or something now. And most people probably know me from my rather long stint as a moderator of the visual novel subreddit, which I recently stepped down from, but... Yeah, I'm still, and obviously there's probably a lot of people who will know me from still being a moderator of the Discord. But yeah, I started reading untranslated visual novels around this time 2 years ago, and I think I'm at about almost 100 titles finished in Japanese since then. So it's been,
well, hot damn.
It's been a good 2 years.
I like how last time we had you on, you had read like 100 titles like in English, and that was like an impressive thing. And now it's been just 2 years since you started reading Japanese. And it's like, oh yeah, I just have read like 100.
Yeah, I started. My first like Japanese untranslated visual novel was my 100th vote on VNDB, so it's like my 100th visual novel finished, and then since then I think I'm close enough to about 100 finished now since that point, which has been a pretty crazy 2 years as far as the stuff that I've read and my taste and that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, no, it was like, as far as like visual novels being a pretty important part of my life, and obviously my main hobby, learning Japanese, was the best choice I've made with regards to that by far. You know, it's been a huge part of my life since then, and also just like was really, really fun to do.
Well, let's dive into that then, because I think the whole process of learning Japanese is something that gets talked about on the subreddit a lot. But at the same time, I think, maybe identifying some of the motivations for it might be a good idea, aside from the obvious of, well, you can read stuff in Japanese, but like, what is the real sort of benefit and meat of the process that people might not necessarily know about or really like understand the significance of?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the big thing, at least like for me personally, and especially over the last year specifically, as I've kind of improved a lot in my like ability to read, is just being able to like, you might run across a random visual novel randomly, in chat, or even, one game I like to play is to go onto VNDB and just hit random until I find something that looks different or interesting. And the cool and like one of the biggest benefits I've found is the ability to be able to find random stuff like that and just be able to pick it up and read it like straight away. You don't have to worry about, whether or not it's translated. Like, a big thing you see when people are recommended things is they immediately have to see if there's an English translation or not. Whereas you don't really have that issue. You can, start digging really deep into like the more niche side of stuff and find your own really specific area of games that you really like to read and really, really enjoy, and not really have to worry about whether or not somebody who can translate really well will ever care enough to actually pick up that game and translate it so that you can actually read it. It just opens up a whole new way to approach which games you actually want to read, which is a huge thing for me personally.
Yeah, I've seen that with a lot of people coming in and saying, hey, I want to read, like, I read this thing, what's something like it that I could read, or I'm interested in these types of things, what's out there for me. And having only the English translated pool to draw from gives you an incredibly small amount of titles to choose from, whereas sometimes the only thing that could fit what somebody really wants to read and is looking for is something that isn't translated and probably never will be translated. So it really just opens up the doors to being able to find what you are really interested in, rather than the kind of titles that have been curated for us by the people who translate, or the localization company to choose what to translate.
Yeah, that was the big thing as well. Like, I mean, even for popular stuff like Moege are obviously so popular among English readers as well. But a couple of years ago, I like when people would come and ask me for recommendations, since I was always such a big fan of those, I found it really hard to actually like give those recommendations because there wasn't a whole lot at the time. There's more now, obviously, but you know, you're still kind of at the whim of either. But fan translations aren't really a thing anymore as much, although they kind of have been recently. But you know, you're kind of stuck with whatever the localization companies decide, which can lead to some really weird stuff. Like a recent example being the Rance games, which I've been getting really into as of late.
You're getting close to the end of those now, aren't you?
I'm on 8 now. Oh, and I've read all 8 or 7 of those this year. But you know, like Manga Gamer have the license for Alisoft and have announced most of the Rance games already, but they've like kind of randomly skipped over the remakes of the first, second, and third one. And the third one in specific, it kind of introduces a huge amount of the world and the plot for the later game. So like skipping over it just completely randomly, it just doesn't really make much sense. And like, at least as far as up till 7 goes, it's like by far the best game in the series that I've played so far. So, you know, just sometimes the companies can make these really seemingly strange decisions that, you know, kind of completely messes up the English speaking side, because, you know, a lot of people now will go and probably play Sengoku Quest 9 and possibly even 10 without ever playing 1, 2, or 3 because they just can't.
Yeah, I think something I didn't even really appreciate till recently too is just how different the size of the pool is for English translated VNs versus Japanese. I think it was Nata Taishi who's running a contest on the subreddit recently for the most desired English translation for VNs, and I think when the first round came out of like the group stages in that poll, I maybe recognized 5% or fewer of the titles in that. I was like, wow, same. Okay, I hear about a lot of the highly desired VN translations, but that still doesn't even come close to really properly encapsulating like just how big of a difference the amount of available reading material is.
Yeah, that's like, and then the cool thing is like even like from the stuff that I've read over the 2 years, like most of my favorite games, or you know, stuff that I've loved like more than the other stuff that I read, are games that most people on the English side have probably either never heard of or would, you know, they're not really on that blip. You kind of be able to get into that space where you can find those, you know, the kind of more different things, whereas everyone knows the big names. Like a lot of people, when they start learning Japanese, and I know I did as well, like I have a couple of games that I specifically started to learn Japanese for, and I still haven't actually read them because I've just found all this other random stuff that I ended up loving even more than the prospect of getting to read this stuff, you know. There's a huge amount of stuff there. Like I said, I've almost like 100 now finished, and there's still like an endless amount of things that I still want to play and still plan on getting around to. It's really crazy, you know. There comes a point when I was reading in English when I definitely felt I was starting to like scrape the bottom of the barrel of stuff where I was reading things.
It's kind of a little close to where I'm at.
But once you kind of get to the point where you're comfortable enough reading things in Japanese at a decent pace, you just kind of it's like you're getting back into the medium for the first time again, where it's like holy shit, there's so much of this stuff.
Oh yeah,
that's super exciting actually, because I think if this is one of those things where everyone on the subreddit hears those big like chase VNs, you know, you think it's like White Album 2, Muramasa, these things that the best way to experience them is just to learn Japanese. And even until recently, some of, you know, like DSERI, those kinds of things, just like the rate of translation is certainly increasing, but at the same time, I think it's never going to really make up for the breadth of experience you can get by picking up the language and really diving in.
Yeah, and I mean, there's obviously kind of have to consider like the fact that the Japanese side are still releasing games, and you know, it's still a pretty, it's declined a bit obviously, but it's still a pretty active market that's releasing, you know, dozens of games a month, and as far as like quality goes, you can still look towards, maybe depending on like your standard, there was, you know, 2 or 3 games came out this year which were like huge releases that like as founded like the Japanese reading side were like highly regarded. Obviously, like Rance 10 came out. There was Nukitashi came out, which had a a really really amazing response, and there was a couple of smaller titles then as well that got really good responses. But there's also like I found on average of at least one or two things most months come out that I read and enjoy. So you have it's like a constantly increasing number of stuff that when you get to that point as well, where you kind of constantly have access to all of these new things coming out as well.
It's just the ever-growing backlog.
The ever-growing backlog, yeah.
And there's no end in sight.
Off one or two things and four more things get added.
I think personally something a little bit, this is kind of changing topic a little bit, but something I think underrated about like why reading untranslated visual novels is if you kind of look at the scope of learning Japanese as something that is not necessarily just for VNs, but something that is useful, maybe not entirely useful, but it has some value outside of reading VNs. I really feel like reading VNs has some unique advantages that like practicing on other media does not. For example, like you get kind of a good mixture because visual novels are pretty like diverse medium in terms of you have audio, you have text, and you have pictures, which really kind of helps capture a space that, like, looking at manga, you have text and pictures, looking at anime, you have pictures and voices, and looking at, like, light novels or just novels, you just have text. So it kind of, like, hits a nice spot where I find that it actually really helps because I've been reading just a bit, still working on my first, but I think the being able to piece things together in context from not just like the images on screen and also listening to the voices for kanji I might immediately recognize, and then also having the text option has been really helpful for me, like picking things up that might not have been the case if I were starting on something like trying to read a light novel.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of people kind of getting into something we'll talk about later, but a lot of people will say about when you're starting off reading in Japanese, having something that's really dialogue heavy so that you can hear the voices for everything can be so helpful in getting you started because you'll just hearing it and seeing it all at once rather than just having this mass of strange looking characters in front of you that have no real meaning yet can just kind of help accelerate the process of learning the language.
There's also like something I found like personally, and there's still a certain element to it, although it's not as bad for me anymore. But like because visual novels tend to like deliver lines in the average game, maybe one or two lines per like mouse click, or upwards of some certain games we might get longer to full paragraphs or whatever. But the feeling of when you like turn a page and if you're reading a light novel or even just a website or anything, you see just like huge amount of text sitting in front of you can be kind of intimidating. I found when I first started out, but
100%.
like a single sentence or two is much more manageable.
Even long lines in the text box can be intimidating sometimes.
Well,
there's a couple of games full of writers who are pretty infamous. Like I was reading Swan Song a little while back, and it's like you click the mouse once and it'll fill up the entire page or the entire display with text, and it's just like, okay, that's the thing.
I remember starting off and I tried to read Tsuriotsu pretty early on, and I stalled that because it has not only does it have a smaller text in general than most of the other things that I've read, but they like to fill the box a lot. And I just several one of those I clicked and it filled the entire box. It's like, oh, that's a lot of stuff.
You have to deal with the like O Jackson prologue in that game as well, which is a whole different mountain to overcome.
It was it was very very intimidating starting off, which I should actually get back to that now that I'm a little more comfortable myself. But
I've been meaning to get around to that series as well. It's another one that everyone keeps telling me I need to read, and then I just kind of don't.
Speaking of that, do you want to kind of maybe get into some recommendations then? I mean, I think I know, for example, we have like the chart on the VN subreddit that has some good guides, and this is certainly a topic that I'm less experienced on just because I don't have kind of that level of time spent reading VNs. But like, what would you say are good examples of either like VNs people might not have heard about, or like good starter VNs, kind of for reading untranslated?
Oh, that's a good question actually. Like for
Because you mentioned that like this, it's a good way to get access to stuff that like you might never have heard of, or is like its own kind of style that just doesn't exist in the translated
yeah, like
corpus. So.
I've come like big over like the past kind of 6 months to a year to kind of embody this opinion of like a good starter VN is like anything that you personally want to read more so than like something specific than Hanahira is one that's always thrown around. It's just like the most boring, inane, like brain numbing stuff that like people end up quitting learning Japanese because it kills them. Like, whereas I find like picking up something specifically that you actually have an interest in, you might struggle. Like, there's obviously things you want to avoid, like anything by Marne, or like we were talking, some of the like you wouldn't pick up Oretsuba straight away, obviously. Or anything by Masada at all would be a terrible, terrible idea. But if you're going to picking from the kind of much larger pool of anything around the same level of difficulty, whatever it is that you think looks interesting that you'd like to read is a much better pick, because it'll keep you motivated to actually keep going at it, because everything is going to be difficult at first, whether it's a moege or an action game or a more serious character driven story or whatever. Everything is going to be difficult, so it's very much about making sure that you have that motivation to keep ticking away at it over and over until suddenly you realize that you're 100 visual novels in and it's been 2 years. But yeah, so starter recommendations, man. And there's obviously there's stuff that's memed that are bad ideas that probably are going to be bad ideas. I think certain comedy things can be tough to start off with. Like Norototo is a pretty, it can be a bit of a tough one to do at first because it relies really heavily on slang, which can like mess up text hookers or anything like that, because it can't pick up on a lot of that slang or like shortened words or that kind of stuff. So, but beyond that kind of stuff, man, whatever you'd like, go for it. It's all about just finding something that's going to keep you going, which is the big thing. Because once you get over that first one, I find it'll get a lot easier after that, because you're like, okay, I've done one now, I can do this. I can keep going. But for just kind of general recommendations of stuff that people might not have heard about, like I'm probably like not the best person to ask for this, because my like opinion and taste in visual novels is kind of skewed off into a very odd direction over the past year.
I think you mean shit, right? Or is that, or just kind of gloss over that?
Depends on who you ask. Like my favorite visual novel is Chrono Box, and like a lot of people really hate that game. And like I read Dasaku before that by the same person, and that's a Goro Nukage. Like, it's pretty.
I knew that one was going to come up at some point.
Yeah, but there's certain stuff like Tsukikage no Simulacre by Akabe Soft 3, I think it was, or no, it was not. It was Applique, which is an Akabe Soft sub brand. Is a nice short. It's about like 10 hours maybe at most. Mystery romance drama game, which is just, it came out last year, I think, and it's just a really, really cool, really short, really, really to the point. It's super well paced, and it's just a really, really cool, fun game. I really like that one. It's something
I think that's on my plan to read list then.
Yeah, not a lot of people tend to kind of stumble onto that one too much, which is a shame, because it is a really, really cool little small game. You could I think I read it in 2 or 3 days, which is it's a short enough read. There's some other stuff like the Eero games, like Nana Eero Reincarnation and Ake Eero, are both super, super excellent. Most people tend to know those games, and I think like Nana Eero is getting a translation soon enough, so anyone who reads in English should definitely check that game out as well when it comes out. Beyond that, like there's a couple of things. Like I have a couple of like authors that I really like Seiyo Jun, who does kind of not so moege style moege for Alcott's sister brand. He has a couple of really, really great games that I really like. Amatsutsumi is one that I have to throw out there by Purple Soft. It's absolutely excellent. It's one of my favorite visual novels that I read over the 2 years. and has absolutely unbelievable art, as anyone who's ever seen a screenshot from it can probably attest to.
Yeah, Purple Soft has got really high production values in the art, on their art in general. So, which at least our English speakers should know from at least seeing Chrono Clock, which is the only.
Yes, yeah. Koku did the art for some of the art for Chrono Clock. There's kind of an issue with both Amatsutsumi, Chrono Clock has it, and Aotori has it as well, where there's always a second artist who's like not nearly as good as Koku is, and just kind of really stands out in comparison. It's really funny to see like the sprites done by one artist, on screen, with the sprites done by another, and it being really, really, really obvious who did which. But that game
the rose guns days problem.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah.
It's super noticeable, and there was a point in Amatsutsumi's side route where it was like the artist just kind of gave up on trying, and the CG just get real bad. But that's a great game. As far as other than that, there was the big release from this year, which came out that like really shocked a lot of people with how good it was definitely Nukitashi, Nukigami Tainashima Nasunderu Watashi wa Dousuria I desu ka? Which was it, like from the title, even like a lot of people either suspected it was going to be a Nukigay, or there was when the site originally went up, there was a button you could click up at the top of it, which turned all like this super spy thriller.
We totally talked about this last episode. Actually,
we 100% talked about it last episode.
Yeah, that was like unbelievably good. Like I was expecting it to be like kind of silly and ridiculous and kind of fun, and it ended up being just like spectacularly written in so many ways. It was so funny. The action was amazingly bizarre, with like dildo battles and all this kind of crazy shit being used, but then still managed to pull off these really amazingly emotional character arcs, and just this really bizarre thematic depth, and then the whole thing kind of functioning on another level as like a meta commentary on eroge as a whole. It's this thing that really shouldn't work, but like really, really does, and was so good. But that was definitely worth checking out. I think anyone who enjoys eroge as a medium would really like that game. But yeah, other than that, I don't know. I like a lot of weird stuff, so I can kind of give some of the big name titles that people can read out, or could read. Obviously, like Tsubihime and Sakura no Uta are two big ones. I haven't read the latter. I mentioned earlier, actually, I'm getting into the Rance games lately, which are actually like really, really, really damn good, and I kind of wrote them off for a long time, and I don't know if I regret doing it, but I got into them a lot recently, and I've read like 6 of them over the past couple of months, which has been a really interesting couple of months. But those games are really, really cool, and anyone like who can read Japanese should definitely give the first remake a shot at some point. And see how it goes. The third game is when the series kind of really gets going, but that was really surprised me by how good those games actually are, and aren't just kind of like The Adventures of Rape Man, as it recently popped up on Twitter as. But yeah, no, I think those kind of covers a pretty decent wide area of stuff that you could stuff that people may not have considered or thought about or heard of before.
I know you said earlier that just try to stick with something that actually interests you, but is it true, like I'm speaking as someone who only really recently started learning Japanese, like I only just mostly learned hiragana and like a little bit of grammar and vocab and very little so is it true like in moege that like don't have like particularly interesting gimmicks? It's kind of just like a standard like moege high school romance comedy kind of thing, like, or is it true like those kind of at least stick to like hiragana and easier kanji, which could be an easier for newer readers?
It honestly depends. Like I've read some moege that have had random info dumps on random topics. There's a couple of games that just randomly go off topic onto weird stuff. There was one I read a little bit of a couple of months ago, where the protagonist was just inexplicably like really into smoking food, like smoked meat and that kind of stuff, and so it would just randomly go into tangents on how he does this stuff, and it's and it was just like there's a lot of games that like try to give the characters these really weird character traits to distinguish themselves, and end up having this really niche stuff. But you know, like at first, like I found, like I read Moe as my first game, and like I found it was tough. Like, and like I view it as like everything is going to be tough at first, and it's just a case of you get used to reading it as you go. Like you're going to pick up, like most games will kind of cover a lot of basic kanji that you'll start to pick up the more you see of them, the more you read. And like some moege will have like less complicated plots even, so you know there's a lot less to kind of confuse you, you know. There's kind of the opposite, like stuff like I talked about earlier, where stuff that's super heavily dependent on comedy can probably actually be a pitfall for you to start off with, because you might not get a lot of the jokes. Yeah, like that author I mentioned, Seo Jun, his games are like super heavy. Like there's a lot of actual plot there as well, but his like common roots especially, and a lot of the kind of the basic scenes in roots and that kind of stuff is super heavy on comedy. And you know, it's the kind of comedy that might kind of based on wordplay or something at times, or just, you know, if a lot of that kind of stuff starts to fall flat for you on your first time, you might just kind of get frustrated at what's happening, you know. So yeah, I think there's like a balance. Obviously, like I was saying, you don't want to pick something that's like crazy difficult to follow, or something like that's like really tuny or something like that. It's going to be really difficult. But you know, it's better. Like if you like Moege, then by all means go straight for a Moege. That's what I did, and I enjoyed my first Moege, and it was probably a comparatively easier than some of the other stuff that I read. But if you don't like Moege, don't force yourself to read Moege just because you think it's going to be easier. Is kind of what I was trying to get off originally. You know, like I don't really agree with this whole thing of people trying to force themselves through games that they don't even like enjoy because it's supposed to be easier. You know, obviously, like Moege, some of them will be comparatively easier, but at the same time, when you're starting out, it's probably going to be kind of negligible how much of a difference that's going to make for you. It's more of a long-term thing where, you know, as you're getting better, you'll probably read Moege quicker if they're simpler. But, you know, like I still think it's just kind of, you know, something that's going to keep you interested. Like another one would be like gameplay stuff. I think can work quite well for a starter, because you have gameplay breaks, which will break up the reading, which can be
in a way, one of the kind of nice things about some of the gameplay VNs too is one of the most intimidating things about them is that you've got this whole interface going on that you're like, oh my god, there's all this stuff going on. But you know, a lot of them actually have just an interface patch for somebody starting off, which might be enough to kind of take off the edge to be able to use something like that, because there's some awesome gameplay VNs out there that.
There's a couple of games I've played as well that even just from testing it out, the text hookers can actually hook the interface themselves as well. Like I know that usually card game, what was it called? Soukoku,
yes,
I think. Yeah, there was parts of the, you know, like there was points in that, because I read that a while ago, where there might have been items that I couldn't read the name of, but if you go into like the glossary section and just hover over it, the text hooker would pick that up as well.
That's actually amazing.
So, you know, it's but you know, like stuff like the first Rance game that I mentioned earlier, most usually games are pretty easy to play even without being able to fully read everything, especially if you played something like Kamidori, then something like Amiyui will probably come a lot easier to people. And there's a lot of frequent gameplay breaks which can make, you know, rather than trying to force your way through you know, a full hour of not really understanding what you're doing, if you do like, you know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes of reading, and then you have a gameplay segment for 5 or 10 minutes, which can perk you up a little bit, and then it'll go back to text and you can get through it a little bit, and then, you know, another gameplay mission. It can be a nice, you know, change of pace while you're doing it, rather than just pure text
that was
the whole way,
that was one of the things that really hit me when I was first starting, is that it was kind of exhausting to just purely be poring over this Japanese, being like, okay, so and then I see there's a whoa there, so that is and like just putting these sentences together when I was still really getting a grasp of Japanese sentence structure even, and just the way that everything flows. I needed, like, part of why, for me at least, I would read so slowly when I started off is that after parsing a few of these on my own, I would just like kind of shut down for a moment. I was like, all right, well, let's go look at Discord now, and then
absolutely
have my little break there and then come back. But if that's like right in the game itself, then that would help to keep me focused if that had been something that I had read very early on.
Yeah, I've been finding, because I'm still working on my first one, that what I end up doing a lot of the time is I just exit Discord and make sure that I'm not on voice chat. I try to remove distractions because it definitely can get tiring when you're starting out. It's easy to just like kind of get overloaded by everything around you, but at the same time, like I think this is why Corn's advice about picking something you're interested in is a very good choice. Like, I'm working on Ustia, which I actually am enjoying a lot. I think the plot's very interesting, and I have to say, if this were like a Moege, because I'm not a Moege fan, if I had picked it because it were easier, I would be wanting to kill myself or just stop learning Japanese, because it's just it's not worth the amount of effort that goes into.
I remember the first two things I read in Japanese were the first Leyline game, and then Harukuru was the second one that I finished, and there was a point in both games, and really Harukuru especially, where I got to a point where it's just like all distractions go, like even though Discord was still open, like there was no temptation to look at it because I was just that invested in what I was reading at that time. And that's really what you want when you're learning, because you want to put it together. You want to make sure you understand all of these sentences. And it's really the far better way than reading something inane like Hanahira. And just like, sure, it's easy because there's a lot of kana in it, and it's simple kanji that you'll see. There's like
no narration or something,
like super basic stuff.
Dialogue,
you'll be able to put together the technicalities of the sentence structure, and you'll want to gouge your eyes out because it's so inane and boring.
Like I know I did Harukuru, was like I think it was like my fourth or fifth untranslated game, and I remember there being like one point where like I hit this part in the story that you definitely will know which part I'm talking about anyway, and it was like 2 a.m. and I was like, I'll just read like a little bit of it. I'll just read a little bit of it, and next thing I knew, I finished that like kind of train of scenes, and it was like 8 a.m.
That sounds familiar.
I was like, oh what is sleeping?
Good thing I didn't have anything to do tomorrow.
There's points where especially if it's something that you're kind of interested in or something that can get you like that, where like you were saying is and like starting off Harukuru was super exhausting because of how Watanabe writes some of the lines and stuff,
and especially because like there were some typos early on too.
But and it's super exhausting, but you get to that point where you're suddenly reading and it's 6 hours later and you're like, God, and I still feel so great. I could still keep going, but I feel like I'm about to fall asleep. But that's a big thing, because like it's just, otherwise you're just going to hit that wall that when you're starting out, where it's just like you feel like you're not understanding anything and everything is taking you so long to do, and unless you have something that's going to kind of keep you going past that point, it's just what's the point?
Okay, cool. With regards to that, then, do you guys have tips for getting into untranslated visual novels? It's kind of things like trying to focus on things that are, interesting to you, ways that you work on trying to go through the process of like managing vocabulary and grammar, how you work on comprehension, finding that kind of motivation.
Like the big thing I find, like, when you start off, is to not, like, don't worry a huge amount about vocabulary, especially at first. Like vocabulary is something that will come to you as you go. But when you obviously, like most people, this applies, I think, a lot to, I probably should preface this with this, like my experiences specifically learning through reading visual novels. Like I did the usual thing of, going through Tai Kim's grammar guide, and, obviously you learn hiragana and katakana, and you go through the grammar guide and then go straight into reading. Like I didn't know none of those, programs or like those different things that people use to help them remember specific vocab. I did none of that. I went straight into reading.
Like Anki?
Yes, stuff like that. Okay. Stuff like that. I did none of that. I ignored it all and just went straight into reading. And so, like, I had almost no vocabulary at all at first. So for me, like a big thing, and like vocabulary is something that I found just kind of comes to you as you go. The more you see a word, the more you have to, you look up the same word a couple of times, you get annoyed at yourself, continue to look up the same word, but you'll eventually start to remember that word. But when you're first starting, try to work on your comprehension most. Make sure you're actually understanding what's happening. If there's something to do, there's a grammar construct that you don't understand that's kind of really, really messing you up, go back to Taikim, or there's a certain point where you kind of progress to the point where you won't even need to use Taikim. You could just Google it, and you'll be able to read the results that Google is giving you and look up. If there's anything that confuses about grammar, just make sure you look it up and understand it so that it won't get you the next time. Because once you get a decent idea of like Japanese sentence structure and the kind of basic grammar you're going to be seeing, you'll always start meeting more difficult stuff as you go. But once you're hitting that more and more like higher levels of comprehension as you're going, you'll find it'll move much quicker, which will kind of you'll get moving quicker through stuff, and it'll be less of a chore to read. And then you can start worrying, if you're getting to the point where you're still not really remembering vocabulary, you can start looking at those other methods, which like flashcards work for a lot of people, or like a lot of people will just naturally pick up stuff. They'll see it once or twice in a game and then they'll just be able to remember it. You kind of need to figure out what's going to work for you. But like I found personally that like comprehension of what's actually happening is a really important thing when you're starting off, because otherwise you're just going to be super confused all the time. So look, don't be afraid to go back, or even, don't be afraid to ask someone. I've had people, I know like I went through most of Koala's first visual novel in Japanese as she was doing it, where she'd PM me questions constantly, like, and it's just it's always nice. Like I had people that I turned to when I was learning, that if I didn't understand something, I was able to just go, what does this part of the sentence here mean? What's this grammar structure? And it got to the point then where I was just able to start looking them up on myself, which gets, makes it a lot more easier, because you don't have to wait for people to respond. You don't have to worry about bothering people. And it's kind of a really nice feeling to be able to just answer your own question when you're getting stuck. So.
Yeah, I think it's a sentiment I would echo too, actually. It's similar, just kind of address this to you and just give you a little bit of feedback on kind of like my process as well. Because I think this would help be helpful for you, because I'm someone who likes to optimize things, and I wasted a ton of time trying to find like what's the best way to learn Japanese, what's the best way to approach things, like try Genki, try Take Him, try getting Anki decks, try running Wanikani, try all these things. And I feel like the most progress I have made in learning Japanese is not from any of that shit, but from actually sitting down and committing to like reading, because this is how you get the exposure and you get the knowledge. Like a lot of like getting basic words, yeah, sure, this is probably super helpful if you run through like the first, I don't know, couple hundred in the core 2K or something, might give you a good start. But that shouldn't take like that long. And then like what I've been finding, for example, in Ustia is that there's a kind of common vocabulary that the author uses that may not transfer over well. Like, man, do I know all about like the fucking like prostitute and brothel and like brothel street, because Ustia takes place in the slums and the main character is a bodyguard at a brothel, and so you encounter these kinds of words very frequently. Is this useful vocabulary? No, but it is helping me read a lot because those are the things I encounter.
Finish your thought.
So I think that's the important thing, is like get the basics. It's gonna suck no matter what, and then just start diving in. Like instead of spending time wasting like how do I do this the best, just do it. Like all of that time you spend that you could be like prematurely optimizing things, you can spend reading and experiencing, and it's gonna be so much more valuable than saying, okay, well, which of these should I do the visual novel optimized Anki deck? Should I just get the core 6K? Should I sign up for this program?
The real deal, like cool moment for that is when you start to become able to differentiate who wrote a specific part of a visual novel. When there's multiple writers and you start being able to figure out who did what based on the language they use. There's like I play games with 3 or 4 writers where one specific writer will only ever use like a specific kanji for, like, I remember there was one we read at one point that had urusai always in kanji, and then on every other route it was never in kanji, so you'd always be able to tell like that was this specific writer who always does that in all of his other games as well.
That was the point I wanted to make about that, is you can learn as many various things about the language as you want in a vacuum, like all these grammar structures, all these kanji, all this vocabulary and everything, but until you're really like looking at the language and processing it and interacting with it in whatever way you are doing, be it reading or trying to converse with somebody, even in Japanese, like that's where you really start to make progress on it better than any of these other things individually. Because I started off trying to do like Anki decks and stuff, and I was like, I just couldn't engage in that really personally until I was actually like reading stuff, and I was like, hey, I feel like I'm learning now instead of feeling like I'm just beating my head against a wall trying to throw information in there.
Yeah, I think like once you start kind of getting that real life experience, like I know, like I like reading through like Tai Kim and grammar guides and stuff like that. Like you could read through them and you kind of superficially understand what I was saying, but I found I remembered specific things more after I saw them in an actual sentence and got stuck on them and had to go look up what it meant. And I was like, okay, that's what that means. And you remember it a lot better than just kind of these really sterilized examples of stuff that they give you, which are super not like applicable completely. You know, you don't really understand how they work. You kind of just see, oh, well, this means this. But until you start seeing it in action, then you're like, oh, so that's how this is used. That it kind of starts to stick in your memory a lot more.
Something that I've been doing that I've been enjoying a lot, though it's not really related to like visual novels so much, is when I've been watching anime recently, I've been sentence mining it after the fact. So like I go through it and then I run it through a program like Subs to SRS, which converts the Japanese and English subtitles into Anki cards with audio and like a screenshot of the scene where it played. And then I'm using a tool to organize it so that it keeps track of all the words I've seen before and tries to arrange it so that every example sentence I get has exactly one new word in it that I don't know. And I like this a lot because it's been giving me, for example, sentences in, kind of actual sentences that are used in the media that I'm watching. And ideally, if it's a show I've already seen, I know what happened in the scene. And if I've got a good enough memory, I can kind of maybe piece together from context what was going on there, which I think is actually like super helpful for kind of retaining this information.
And just for the listeners who don't know what stuff like Anki and Taikins is, basically Anki is a online flashcard program that people use to memorize, like, whatever language you want. It's not just for Japanese specifically, but it's common, the recommendation in the Japanese learning community. And similarly, Taikins is basically an online guide by a guy named, I guess, Tai Kim, learn Japanese. Like the URL is literally www.guide2japanese.org/learn, and like it has like an outline like on the right side that kind of says first it starts with like a before you start, kind of like giving a little info, and then it kind of goes in an order that like goes through like the characters and then the grammar and all that stuff. Like I haven't.
Yes,
there's two versions of that guide actually. Just something that people want to keep in mind. There's like a full guide to Japanese, which you can like if you wanted to start from zero, and he goes through everything, from the learning hiragana and katakana. It goes through all that kind of stuff, and then there's just a specific grammar guide as well. Then that he goes through, particles, basic grammar concepts, and as it goes a little bit more advanced, and by the end of it, you should have like the guide covers a lot of the basic level grammar that you would need to kind of hold a daily conversation, say, or understand the kind of basic level of dialogue or writing that you'll see. There's there's obviously a whole lot of stuff that's not covered in it, but it gives you a good enough base that you can, like I was mentioned earlier, that you could find stuff out for yourself if you didn't understand it. But like I use just the grammar guide because a lot of people reckon like a lot of people just learn hiragana and katakana on their own and will have that down, and so it kind of the grammar guide just focuses on the exact kind of stuff you'll need to jump straight into reading a visual novel, which is obviously how a lot of people in this community would like to learn Japanese. So just something to keep in mind with the Tai Kim guide is that there actually is two different versions of it. So whichever you prefer, I think both of them are
I've looked a little at both of them,
okay.
And obviously, I mean, there's a lot of overlap. But it is, if you want to start from zero, you can do the complete guide, and it follows a slightly different order, if I recall, teaching some concepts. And it'll actually link to some of the things that he did in the grammar guide too. He actually also has videos accompanying most of those lessons, so like you can actually hear some of it too, which can be helpful for some of the kana that have sounds that you don't necessarily always use outside of Japanese.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the guy himself joined the visual novels Discord at one point.
Yeah,
which was a very, very strange experience when we started to realize who that was.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, like that's what I use. I use the grammar guide. I think a lot of people who like I speak to and converse with on a daily basis who are either learning or learned or, you know, kind of at various stages all tend to use that as their base. So it's a pretty good base. Just again, something to keep in mind is that it's not comprehensive, so that you will still find stuff that's not going to be in that guide, but it'll give you a pretty solid base to be able to get started at least, you know. Which is
that's
good.
always the impression I got from it. Like, it don't like teach you everything, but it teaches you enough to where like once you like finish the guide, which I'm planning on going through myself, like I can you know start like going through what you guys do is just kind of go right into the VN experience or whatever I'm interested in to learn Japanese, and then kind of just look things up as needed and stuff.
Yeah, it's a good like, and just like I know a lot of people kind of get stuck in this thing where the guide can be pretty long and it'll be hard to get through, and you know a lot of people will just read it through entirely and then they won't really, you know, like I found it was super hard to just read it through and then understand straight from that. So like I'm repeating myself a lot with this stuff, but don't be afraid to look stuff up again if you don't get it the first time and you see it and you don't understand it. You know, it's a learning process, funnily enough. So you need to kind of just repeat, you know, kind of go over stuff over and over again, and eventually it'll start to stick and it'll become easier, you know. And that's when it gets really, really fun.
Okay, then I think that basically wraps up most of what I think we had to say here on Untranslated Visual Novels, for the at least allowing for the time slot of the format. Just as a note for everyone listening, what we will do is post a series of links on the blog with this episode that contain information on resources for learning Japanese, dictionaries, grammar guides, information on helping people get into this process. There's a few of those already on the VN subreddit, but again, just kind of consolidate them with the blog post. Moving right along, we can go ahead, I think, here and jump into our news for this episode. I think the biggest thing that has happened for visual novels since the last episode is that Steam is now allowing uncensored erage being sold on the platform through a special filter, which is a huge reversal in policy for basically everything they've had going on for a huge amount of time now. And now there's a bunch of 18+ releases being put on Steam, like Negligee, Shining Star, Star Nova, Eden Plus Mosaic, Eva Nickel, Fashioning Little Miss Lonesome. It's really like opening up now for these kinds of VNs.
I remember 3 months ago when we were sitting here just like twiddling our thumbs, concerned about the future of VNs on Steam because of the direction that it seemed like they were going, and now it's like the floodgates have opened and anything goes. It's kind of surreal if you think about it. Really, like it's such a ridiculous about face to what we saw not all that long ago.
I'm trying to figure out what happened there. Honestly,
I think I really don't know. It's kind of baffling to me, honestly, because they've been so firm about things, and eventually it's like, well, I guess we'll just put it behind an option that you have to.
They learned the real lesson of the internet. You can't stand up to porn.
Yeah,
it's just not going to happen.
Honestly, I will say I like that they finally caved and are doing this, because we've been kind of fighting against this thing the whole time, and it's all behind checking a box in your user options, and as long as you opt into it, I guess anything goes.
Yeah, that's the thing that's really surprising me, is that like it actually is starting to look like the line is pretty far. I mean, like Alice, like if you had told me 6 months ago that Alice Soft Games would be on Steam, I would have laughed at you, which is insane.
When I saw the announcement that Eventical was on there, like I've read that entire game. There's some stuff in there that I never would have thought was on Steam. Like, you don't even have to patch it. You just go out and get it, and you've got everything. Just kind of blows my mind a little bit.
We're definitely going to see Rance on Steam in our lifetime.
I sure hope so.
It's going to blow my mind.
I am waiting for so many good VNs to get there, because it's for maybe not for the bulk of VNs, but especially for the gameplay VNs that we chatted about a little bit earlier, it's going to really open up it's going to really open up the opportunity for those to become really kind of maybe truly profitable in a way that our localization companies never really dreamed of, because Steam is just it's the place to find stuff.
There's a lot of like gameplay stuff, especially that you can't really take out the sexual content without like having to take out significant chunks of the game and have to change stuff. Absolutely. So like, you know, a lot of those games weren't really possible to localize because of the cost that would go into it compared to like the relatively small user base you could get to without being able to put them on a place. But having them on Steam now with, you know, intact means that there's a huge potential user base now there that, you know, usually games might not be as completely ridiculous a concept to be translated anymore, since you can just those are pretty decent games on their own, and like I could see them selling pretty okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like me and some other massive fans of Yumina the Etheral have been saying how great it might be if it actually is able to hit Steam, because the big stopping block for that being on Steam before is that because the 18 plus content for that game, totally not essential to the story. 100% doesn't need to be there, but it is. And an all ages version of that game was never made. And
apparently the engine and stuff for Yumina is apparently just a nightmare as well. Yeah, so like creating
the engine is actually a disaster, but that's a whole other story. But there's a real possibility that, you know, taking the time to adapt that to go on Steam now, that they don't have to actually cut content, they just have to do some programming things.
That's a lot to ask, Jess, though.
Which is a lot to ask, let's be honest. But it's a real possibility now. Be cool. Whereas before it was just like there's no possible way this would happen. But I would love.
It's a good game, so it would be cool to see it happen as well.
Absolutely, I agree.
I think personally it doesn't affect me too much for the most part. We'll see. We've got Mink, which is a long-time VN publisher, creator of Night Shift Nurses, for example, will be shutting down this year after releasing their last work. I think it was announced like September 3rd or something, somewhat recent. Just again, very long history in the industry.
Yeah, this is a thing that is happening to a lot of. It's become more and more like not uncommon to see on the Japanese side of stuff is these monoliths of the industry. You know, these you know, like Elf shutting down is a huge thing, obviously, because Elf is so steeped in history. But it's just, you know, there's a lot of brands now that are just you know, shutting down recently. We talked about Harukuru earlier, and Sumiko Soft, the company that Watanabe wrote all those games at, they closed down when Akikuru was released. So, you know.
And Akikuru was the last one, and they still had one to go.
Yeah. Watanabe actually it's completely off topic, but Watanabe still tweets about wanting to write Fuyukuru. So, you know,
I hope
impossible.
That happens.
But yeah, it is like, you know, there's a lot of people who doomsday a lot about the eroge industry in Japan, and it's certainly declined a lot of ways, and you will see there's a lot of companies that are closing down. It's not as bad as people make it out to be. There's still a lot of good stuff coming out, but it is still pretty sad to see these like companies that have been around since like the 90s finally packing up shop, which is just it's a shame. It is a shame, but it's becoming sadly more and more common.
Yeah, I think it's kind of more like the landscape is changing. It's not like the death of the industry or anything, but the landscape is definitely changing when you see some of these monoliths going out.
Yeah,
Change of times.
Pretty much, yeah. Different audience, different like Rance 10 was a big release because I had a lot of people from that era who don't really play eroge anymore, but who have followed that one specific series, who came back out of the woodwork to like finish off this series. That there's a very funny joke in the remake of the first Rance game on Tada, who's like the director of the whole series, in his little staff corner where he talks about the first game being a game that your father could have played. And it's like when you actually like it came out in like 1987 or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it literally is a game that like your father
was born that year.
And it's, you know, there's not a lot of companies around that are still doing that. You know, But on the contrary, like there's a lot, like Nukitashi was from a completely new company who they had only done doujin games before that, and there's a couple of newer brands that are starting up that are looking towards being the new face maybe of Erage. So it's not all bad, but yeah.
Moving on from some studio closure, we've got a new studio, or new company being formed called Tokyo Games, with a bunch of big names from the Danganronpa and Zero Escape series. They've announced 4 projects already, including a huge number of people from these big projects like Danganronpa, Zero Escape, Ever 17, Root Double, that I'm just super excited about. That looks like they're starting off with like a death game for 12-year-olds or of 12-year-olds, because of course you gotta go with the start. They start with the classics, but I think the other projects are it's looking like they're going to be new types of games from what we've seen so far. So I'm pretty excited for this, just because again I'm a big fan of the series, so I'm looking forward to seeing where they go with it.
Yeah, for those people who are fans of the Infinity series, which is not me, the seeing the reunion of Nakazawa and Uchikoshi is really huge for some people, because they are both working together on these projects. And I think a lot of people are of the opinion that some of the best stuff they've done is the stuff they've done together, but they have creative differences. So a lot of people are very excited about that. I will probably take a look when it comes out, but I don't know, because so far my experience with their work together is not great.
Yeah, I'm just gonna I'm not gonna say much on this topic myself.
Yeah, that's probably wise. Knowing that we are of like mind on that, Corn, that's probably wise.
Yeah.
Okay, Corn, we know you have shit taste, so I'll move on.
Yeah.
There's a fan translation of Baldr Force that came out of absolutely nowhere, which I've picked up and read a little bit of, but not super far into. But it's definitely kind of nice surprise to see some good fan tales coming out, and also of a game that I think should be hopefully interesting for people that are interested like in the Baldr series. So.
That one was very weird, because it like you said, it literally just some guy appeared on 4chan, I think it was, and it was like, yo, here's a translation for Baldr Force, go mad. And then it was like, I 100% thought it was a joke when people started talking about it, and then
it's actually there. It is a full translation.
Yeah, right.
Like there was an associated Twitter account that was like teasing things, like that nobody was following, mind you, like teasing things for like a few weeks beforehand, and it literally just out of nowhere. By the way, here's this TL that nobody knew about. What?
Yeah, it's good. It's good though, because like I haven't read the Baldr game or played the Baldr games myself, but everyone I've spoken to says that it's a good idea to do Force before Sky if you ever plan to do Force, because one, like they're kind of connected, and like Sky does take place like chronologically after Force, but mostly that like the system in Sky is like a huge improvement over Force. So like going from Sky to Force is a lot worse than going from Force to Sky, because you're going from a really good system to a not as good system, rather,
Baldr Force is miserable to play, I'll tell you right now.
compared to like going from Force, which is I don't know, I haven't played it, but apparently it's like a good starting point. It's good, but Sky is just like on a whole different level.
Doing a lot of button mashing. It's very confusing how a lot of systems work. Like you have multiple buttons mapped on the controller, because I'm playing with a controller, and like so like the buttons. The buttons do different things based on like which range you press them at, and it's like not well documented. It's super fun. I was like, wait, I had this realization that of course this game is not well documented, because back when this game would have come out, like games came with manuals.
Of course.
Of course.
Just read the manual. God, what are you complaining about?
Man.
Before I get back into it, I'll probably do that.
But
I'm surprised you didn't do the EXE version, which I know about, versus the regular version, which I believe is the one that got TL'd.
Force has like weird version things where just like the original game has like really bad porn in it, and then the PS2 version, I think, has like much improved gameplay, and it has like a voiced protagonist or something like that. And I can't remember which version was TL'd, but I think it's one of the better versions. It wasn't the original, which is good, at least. I'm kind of glad people aren't like desperately clamoring for the restoration of the sex scenes, because there's some weird shit in that game, like really weird shit in that game that I don't think people realize that to be asking to put back into it. Yes, so maybe like if you want scat in your Baldr games, then by all means, yeah. But no, it was cool. It was a cool.
Boy.
Oh, that's bad, huh?
Cool,
Okay.
it was a cool sudden announcement, which was nice to see.
Yeah.
And apparently the translation is quite good as well, which is also very good to see.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, from what I saw, it was solid.
Yeah, it's not just cranked out for the sake of release or anything.
Yeah. Apparently that, like, from what I've been seeing, it seems to be the best method for doing a fan translation nowadays is to keep quiet about it and just drop it.
That seems to be, from the murmurings I've seen from a variety of people, that seems to be the preferred and probably ideal method, is to not say anything and then just out of nowhere just drop something and say, hey, I did this thing.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Naturally, I don't encourage breaking the law or anything like that, but you can't be C and D for something that nobody knows about.
Yeah, that's the idea.
But there was a couple other, like I think there was like an Goei translation also announced. It was just like complete. It was 100% translated and just needed like editing or something.
Yeah, that sounds like a thing that might have happened.
But apparently that one is apparently not as good, which is a shame. But oh well.
So you go.
Speaking of fan translations, we also have fan translation of the Trial of Summer Pockets, as well as Bishoujo Mangekyou coming out recently, which are things I'm not at all familiar with, actually.
B-Man is actually quite a good Nikkei. I would highly recommend it, as I think I have done so many times actually already. And I'm not even done with that one. Like it's really good.
It's really I've read the first one. And I plan to do the other ones in the series at some point as well.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to do the rest of them too. Like even not even having finished the first one, it's very good.
The first one is kind of it's pretty simple.
Yeah,
at its heart. It's just a romance story. Like, but it's a pretty cool aesthetic it's got going on, and the art is just like unbelievable.
Oh god, yeah.
And it has some weird stuff. Like it's very 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 clearly like really super heavily inspired by Lolita, the book.
Yeah.
And like the protagonist is pretty much basically the protagonist from Lolita, which makes for some
protagonist really is actually awful. God, I hate that guy so much.
He's a big piece of shit.
Oh my god, I hate it so much. He's so bad. But yeah, no. Yeah.
Kyrie is good though.
Kyrie is amazing.
I'm hoping. I think Arcade actually was considering doing the rest of the series, which would also be pretty cool.
Like maybe it was going to happen. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of
2 and 4 is from what I've heard. They're like the real deal good ones in that series. So hopefully that continues to go along and maybe won't take as long as the first one did come out. Summer Pockets actually was an interesting one because I don't like key games very much, so I didn't bother with Summer Pockets, but it seemed to be pretty well received from the people I know who read it.
Generally, what I saw too, yeah.
It seems kind of apparently was kind of like drew, I'm going to say, inspiration from a lot of older key games and kind of like rethreaded some places and ideas that they went already, but I've also, for the most part, the response seemed pretty positive. So key fans should probably be hopeful then maybe that the rest of it will get translated as well, and it'll be another key game for you guys to read. Go wild.
Well, we're still waiting for some other key games that have supposedly are supposedly going to be getting
and knows nothing about.
Official translations that.
At least there was some progress. At least there was an update for Rewrite Plus. At least there was an update, of minor one at least.
Yeah, well, Angel Beats never.
Rewrite retranslation is pretty exciting news, I guess. I'm not the biggest fan of Rewrite, but the main stuff was good. So having a decent translation for that main stuff would be good.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to some corporate news, we've got a new localization company called Love Lab and led by Meru is planning to release Lamination International Q1 2019. These are words that I'm saying that I have no idea what they are because I don't follow anything about lamination.
So it's funny actually seeing the announcement of TL of Lamination, because Lamination is like one of the biggest meme VNs that's been released in recent history. Like, and it's funny because isn't it a lot of like English memes too? That
yeah. The guy who wrote Lamination, he got kind of like fame to an extent for writing in a previous game called Love Potion 69, which I have read.
Yeah.
It was really, really bad. It was terrible. But his style of humor is very like referential and kind of, random funny XD memes kind of thing. But he has a lot of Western, like Love Potion 69 had a load of, there was one weird reference to an 80s movie called The Mailman. There was David Beckham was name dropped, Back to the Future got a load of references. There was a load of like random English references because he's a big fan of like English stuff.
Referential humor is like my least favorite humor.
Yeah, Love Potion 69.
It's like 90% of all of my humor, so.
Yeah, but just something to like put into perspective, Lamination compared to Love Potion 69. Love Potion 69, actually, there's some people out there who like it and thought it was funny and a pretty okay game. Lamination was very close to winning Kusoge of the year it came out, and was narrowly beat.
I think it was narrowly
go ahead. Bet out by a game that actually somebody I know, Zodi, has played called... what was that game called? Grimo Love, which is barely functional as a story in itself. It's just a bunch of weird chapters that don't really make any canonical sense together. Lamination came a close second to that one, where it was like...
I think the only person I've heard say good things about Lamination is Checker Peck, which should be
I think so.
Indicative for anyone who knows that name.
It's apparently it's just bizarre and weird and just not funny at all. Like, it's just everyone, like, I know a lot of people on the Japanese reader side of things read the trial, and it came out because, again, there were some people who actually did like Love Potion 69, despite the fact that I didn't. But even the people who did like Love Potion 69 thought that Lamination was just complete trash. So
that was definitely a puzzling announcement to me. Gotta say.
Yeah, the Kaposhi, the guy who wrote it, he's a bit of an asshole as well, but that's kind of irrelevant to the content of his bad games. But yeah, he's so I don't know. Personally, I don't think people should get too excited about that. It's a new localization company is cool because Meru is a cool person, and she's working on some cool.
Meru is great.
She's working on some cool games for other places at the moment, and I hope her company goes well, and I hope she gets some actually pretty good titles at some point. But yeah, Lamination is not something that I would recommend people look too deeply into considering.
I don't know if it's through the same through Meru's localization company or through something else, but I know that she's involved with the Harukuru TL that's supposedly on the way.
Yes, that's coming.
Yes, that's right. That's through. I didn't think it was through her own company, but yeah. So that's at least something to look forward to that she's involved in.
Yes, she's also working on Totono for Just as well, I believe.
She's just all over the place, which is good. That's good.
She is, yeah. But yeah, hopefully her company goes well. As far as I know, actually, she protected Kaposhi and Lamination from being picked up by Sakura Gamer, who he was originally in talks with.
That is probably wise.
And she got in contact with him and let him know the kind of dubious things that company gets up to, and he switched to her localization company. So, hey, look, that's good at least.
Hey, there you are.
His game might have made more sense if it was machine translated than it does originally, but...
Oh, God. We've also got Sakura Game changing their name to Paradise Project and getting a hold of Kimi e Okuru Sora no Hana, which, again, is outside the realm of my expertise.
So that one is, from what I know, is just a kind of reasonably standard enough moege. Nake and I kind of find the whole thing pretty funny and awful because there's a person who we know who was kind of that game is very heavily
Yes.
associated with that person. he was
not
very
he was
happy.
I mean, it's the first time he's considered changing his Discord avatar in 2 years time that I've been like I've known him on Discord, so that's big. It's big.
But yeah, I feel like as far as I know, it's okay, and I think like it's just a shame to see more professional companies being sucked up by like Sakura Game or whatever. What are they called now? Did you say
Paradise Project?
It's a shame to see like more games being butchered by these people, which is very upsetting to see. I sincerely hope that nobody. I'm assuming people who listen to this already know well enough to just not ever buy anything from those people.
Yeah, I have to assume that they're turning some profit on these things because they keep picking up stuff, so they must be turning something.
You see, what they used to do, and the reason they functioned so well as a company and made so much money, is that they would go and find doujin devs.
Right, because a lot of
like
stuff
to give perspective on doujin creators on like the DL site Japan side of things, like they don't get a lot of sales most of the time. Like I think Seabed, which was translated, I can't just don't quote me, like I'm not giving exact numbers, but I think like they tripled or something the amount that they sold originally when it was put on Steam. Like, you know, there's not a huge amount of money. A lot of this stuff is passion projects, and like while you will see some games like Teaching Feeling, which was with translated one, sold like a crap ton on DL site. You actually, just again off topic, but if you go onto the JP side of DL site, you can actually see how many units.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was on there last time. It was actually shocking, some of the things that I was looking at, how little they sold.
So what Sakura Gamer used to do was find these doujin devs and then would just pay them a lump sum up front. A pretty reasonable lump sum as well, like more than what some of these people may have made off their game for the license, would run it through whatever crappy software they use to butcher out those translations, and then to just stick them on Steam, which would be really, really low production costs. And then if they got a couple of sales at all, then that was a profit for them, and it was working because people were, you know, they put out weird looking stuff, or, you know, those like weirdly, badly, randomly censored Nukitashi, which would just like light out the genitals, and people would buy it as a joke because it looks so funny, and it's like $3 or something like that. But, you know, if 100 people do that, and then they're making a profit on that, you know, and so that was how they got away with it for so long. And apparently they killed quite a number of quite decent doujin gay that way as well, which is a horrible shame to see. But like, just none of these developers would have any kind of point of contact with the Western scene, so they just wouldn't know. You know, they wouldn't know what was happening to their games, and a lot of people were actually quite upset about it. But a lot of them probably just never even realized, you know. I think as well there was also some really shady shit that they were doing, where like they'd sell games that would give you access to like a competition that they were running or something like that, which is like highly illegal in most places in the US. They're a very shady company, and definitely should not be supported in any way, shape or form. But yeah, so them changing their name to try and maybe escape that negative branding.
It's interesting. It's interesting because
it's good to know about
that. You can change your name, your company name on Steam, apparently just with no fanfare. It was the thing. They just swapped it, and it was like, oh, hey, this new thing, and it doesn't tell anybody who had previously got anything from them, you know, whoever those people are, or anybody who has not bought anything from them before, sees this new thing. Oh, Paradise Project, cool. These guys, who are they? Might not be able to find any information about that because, you know, they haven't existed supposedly before this moment, and it just kind of feels really awful when you look at it, especially knowing like what the quality of product that Sakura Game has put out in the past. It's just
yeah. But sure, look, they'll probably keep doing it and keep getting away with it for a while. But it's just the worst part is that, like, the fact that these games, and there are actual people who are fans of these games, and, you know, there's potential people who could be fans of these games, and it's just completely destroying any chance of that happening for shitty reasons, which is just really, really upsetting as a fan of visual novels, But yeah.
And the last thing we have on our news here today is that Hikosoft has filed for bankruptcy. They're the developer behind Sakura Sakura and Yotsunoha, but the official releases by Soul Press have still been confirmed to happen despite the bankruptcy.
This is one, actually, that I don't think anyone who knows about their Japanese side is at all surprised to hear, with the latest release they put out, which was called Omokage Railback. That was what it was. Which this game was announced. Give me 1 second, and I'll just find when the VNDB page was made for it. In 2015, the page was made for this game on VNDB, and it only came out in 2017 towards the end of it. It was delayed, I think, like 6 or 7 times. It was delayed for like, I think, as far as I remember, it was delayed for like at least a year, probably more. But when it finally came out, then it was basically half a game. It was like, it just had absolutely nothing to it. It was incredibly short. It had a ton of plot that was very clearly supposed to happen and be there. That was all set up, and then just ended. And like to the point that like they had a lot of extra art assets that was very clearly intended to be like used later in the game that they never got to that later in the game. So they stuck in like a load of like H scenes and stuff into just extra menus, and like there was like entire sprite versions in these after story or these extra H scenes that were clearly supposed to happen at a later point in the story that never got used because again that later part of the story never got made. I know a couple of people who were like burned pretty bad because there was a prologue made for it, which was like released at Comic Con or something, or they released this, a prologue for it somewhere beforehand, and apparently it was like really, really good and like set up a really interesting story, and it had like really, really good writing, and a lot of people were pretty excited for it. And then the full version just came out, and it wasn't a full version. It was just, nobody knows what happened during the development of it, but something obviously happened. But they just kind of, they charged full price for this game that had like maybe 10 hours of content or something like that, and just was not finished. So I'm not too surprised to hear that they've closed down, because there was clearly some major issues going on internally at that place. But it's good to hear though that at least their games are still being released through English. The ones that have been announced, because there's a couple of them I think that have actually been announced from that company by Soul Press, from what I remember.
Sakura Yotsunoha, they're both really old. Yeah, Sakura, they finally got over this weird hump that they were trying to roadblock they're getting over, but they say they claim the release soon, but we'll see.
Which is good. It seems to be a thing that's happening with a couple of companies where like the Japanese company goes out of business, and then the localized version is kind of in legal limbo, or eventually is confirmed to keep happening, like the Chuabo Soft game with Manga Gamer, Suki, and then they announced a second one from them. And obviously Sekai have Harukuru, who we mentioned earlier, has also gone out of business. So there was a lot of questions about how that was going to work, but apparently it does. Don't know who the money goes to.
Someone's getting somebody.
But
That's a very good question.
Yep.
Yeah, but hey, look, Harukuru is a very good game, so I'm glad that one's still happening. And I'm sure there's a lot of people excited for Suki and Sakura and those games. So it's cool that they're still happening, These companies going out of business, especially with how common it's becoming. The fact that there is still a chance of them getting official localizations despite that is very, very good news to hear, at the very least. Silver lining and all that.
Cool. Well, I think that basically wraps up what news we have for this episode, so I'm going to turn it over to the Tech Priest, who is going to be shilling Hoshizora no Memoria.
Hello to all those who may be listening. My screen name is The Tech Priest, and I would like to spend a few brief moments talking to you about a visual novel that I personally consider to be among the best that I have ever read. That VN is Hoshizora no Memoria, also known by its English title, Wish Upon a Shooting Star. First released in 2009, Hoshizora no Memoria blends the signature Favorite Studios art style with a solid story and every aspect of the narrative connecting to one central theme. As the name suggests, this VN is based heavily around the stars, and in particular, the stars associated with the Japanese story of Tanabata. Hoshimemo, as it is often referred to as, has several key points where it stands apart when compared to your standard VN. Firstly, the writers and artists are able to create a sense of atmosphere that I consider to be rather rare. A scene watching the stars in Hoshimemo has such good descriptive writing that when paired with the art you can practically smell the fresh night air and can easily imagine moonlight dancing upon the grass of the abandoned lookout. It's an immersive experience that can lead to hours upon hours spent reading without care given to time. Another major point of note is, of course, the characters. But not so much the characters themselves, but rather how the characters fit into the story. At a glance, you could be forgiven for mistaking Hoshimemo as a simple slice of life or comedy VN with some dramatic element. The reality is a fair bit more complicated. Hoshimemo is in fact a mystery VN with dramatic and comedic elements, and even possesses 2 hidden routes and a hidden heroine. Hoshimemo is therefore best described as a grand story with mystery woven throughout, and each character in her respective route uncovering a little bit more of the full story. And here we arrive at the thing that truly elevates this VN. The writing is extremely consistent, and as you work your way through it, you pick up the breadcrumbs from each route and slowly place them all together. By the time you reach the end of the mystery heroine's route, you can form a timeline stretching from that moment back decades before the events portrayed in the VN. The payoff is astounding, and when you combine that with effective use of a great soundtrack, you get a VN that is not afraid to punch you right in the feels and explain to you how and why it happened. So if you're in a good mood and you want a little bit of drama and a little bit of comedy and a reading experience that you'll surely never forget, why not give Hoshimemo a try? This has been the Tech Priest telling you to stay classy, stay reading, and pray for starry skies tomorrow.
Thanks for that, Shill. Oni-chan, let's look forward to reading Hoshizora.
God damn it.
Okay, meme games aside, I want to thank Cornetto for joining us for this episode.
Thank you for having me again. I hope people aren't getting sick of hearing me at this point. I know I will be, but thanks for having me on again.
I think
it's a topic I quite enjoy
anyone
talking
who's
about.
Going to listen. Anyone's going to listen to a podcast about reading untranslated visual novels is already a masochist, so I think you're probably fine on that count.
That's a very, very good point. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I should be offended right now, but I'll let you have that one.
Unless I get my parting shot in. Please join us next episode for our next topic, which will be visual novel endings. And thank you all for listening. I've been Rallin a Tricolor.
I've been Nakanashi.
And I've been Ange Time.
See you next time.